Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, author of various craziness. No, actually science fiction, crime drama, and right now I'm really combining the two. And president of St. Louis Writers Guild. With me today is my co-host,
Kathleen Kayembe, author of Paranormal Romance under the pen name Kaseka and Vita, and lover of fun who just saw Terminator Genesis.
Okay. My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. I have a cold. I apologize.
We still love you.
If I cough at some point, it's I'm trying not to.
Okay, wait a minute. With the host who coughs all the time, I don't think you have to apologize.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm not going to try and cough today. Brad R. Cook. I am the author of the Iron Chronicles. The first of which is Iron Horseman. It's out. Go check it out. Go buy it. Thank you. If you've read it, I hope you enjoyed it. And then Iron Zulu is coming this November, so look for it. And now, as historian of St. Louis Writers Guild, I'm currently writing up the history of St. Louis Writers Guild.
Which has been around will be 95 years in October.
Yes.
I'm Melanie Claney, author of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction. And right now I am feeling a little stuck, but really I'm editing the first draft, so,
Yeah.
Hooray,
Both.
editing.
Yeah.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis, and I'm president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime.
Yay! And you have a book that's coming out soon, though.
I have a book that's coming out from 5-Star in 2016. It's called Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West.
Yeehaw. Okay.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about ethical issues in fiction. Writing about them, what ethical issues we find interesting, how we find sometimes maybe it goes astray in the book, sometimes how it becomes the plot line instead of part of the plot. And who knows where else this is going to go. So, this is what, as a writer, you do instead of posting them on Facebook and driving all your fans away, you put them in your books. At least that's my statement.
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that this is probably the most important topic that we have ignored for over a year. Why? Because we have a special responsibility. All speakers and writers deal in magic, the magic of words. Those words have meaning. They influence people. And so that gives us a much bigger responsibility than others for doing something that is remarkably right. I will give you an illustration that shows how overlooked it can be. In my other life, I was a teacher, and I was kind of a big nabob around the state of Missouri in the field of speech education.
Nabob.
That's right.
Good use of nabob there.
And so I became the Missouri representative to the Speech Education Society of America, which is now the National Communication Society. And what they were trying to do was to set up a bunch of standards to determine what would be the best policy, the ideal speech curriculum for students from grade 1 through 12. And so the core committee wrote up a bunch of wonderful things, and then they sent it out to the rest of us, one person from each state, and I was that person from Missouri. And by the time it came to my hands, about 3/4 of the states had been there and had talked about it and made their contributions. I made one contribution, and I made it to every single standard that they have, and it was to add an ethics dimension, because all of the professionals in my field throughout the entire United States, or about 3/4 of them anyway, had completely ignored the issue of ethics and ethical speech. I think that is something that we all need to give first consideration to, not last.
Let me just clarify. I think it was clear from context of what you were writing. You were talking about like debate speech, convincing other people or public speaking, that type of thing, not enunciation and as someone that went through speech therapy as a kindergartner, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, you were
No,
talking
the
about
standards,
speech.
the standards were inclusive of all different kinds of things.
Oh, so it did
including-
include
it did.
pronunciation.
Not pronunciation so much, but I remember one which was about how to get students to project their voices without harming their vocal cords. So it was that kind of stuff as well.
I wanted to bring up a couple things. One of the things that you said was responsibility, and I had just written that down, writer's responsibility, and underlined it. So when you said it, I was like, yes. You've all heard the quote, with great power comes great responsibility. All
Yes.
y'all.
I think
Stan
Stan
Lee
Lee has that
Spider-Man.
With
copyrighted.
Spider-Man. Yep. So one of the things we'll probably talk about later today is social media, and the fact that our world is so connected means that what we write and what we say has the ability to reach far more people than it ever did before. So being aware of what you're writing, what you're putting out there, becomes so much more important when you realize that you can't control who's actually going to see what you're doing. And I did want to bring up Stephen King for that reason. Stephen King, when he was just starting out writing, had a book called Rage, a novel, about a kid who gets angry and depressed and frustrated and brings a gun to school and shoots it up. This was in the 1970s. He wanted to get it published. He had published Carrie. He did not have a lot of books to his name, maybe just that one. And he eventually published it under a pseudonym because he was advised not to publish it at all due to the content. You don't want to give people ideas. Well, now school shootings are a thing that happen all the time in America. And it's something he feels guilty about putting out there. And he wrote a short story about a road construction murder, a man who uses construction equipment on a road to plan and execute a murder. And Stephen King, in the essay introducing this, said, I know how to do this, actually, but I've changed the details in here because I don't want people getting ideas. Like, he's been there, done that. No, he doesn't like it. So, in that sense, Stephen King has a wider audience than most of us. But still, the things that he writes affected a lot more people than he ever thought they would. So he's more careful now what he writes and what he shows people how to do and the ideas he puts out there. So that's something I wanted to bring up. As writers, we all need to be aware of.
It's very true. I mean, if you look at books in general, but more importantly, what we are producing. We're producing, ideas and creativity that we're putting out into the world. And I agree with both of what you've said, that responsibility is a huge part of this, the ethical concerns that come in. I mean, even something like this show technically goes nationwide. So the things we say
Internationally,
here,
really.
Yeah.
It has gone international.
Oh,
iTunes.
sweet. So we have international viewers. Hi. But yeah, so even now, like what we say in here, in this tiny little room here in St. Louis, Missouri, can have weight well beyond what we think. And keeping an eye on that means I use less curse words.
Thank you.
There are other things too, so, it's just important to remember. But yeah, and it's huge. I mean, you think back to like the Anarchist Cookbook or anything like that. These books are crazily passed around throughout underground libraries, I guess. I don't know.
No, they're not illegal. You could find them if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I really want to, before I turn to you, there's something else I want to say here on the responsibilities and the ethics side. Here we've talked about so far where the ethical topic goes wrong. The mass shootings, the Alchemist Cookbook, and I'm not wanting to walk away from
Alchemist.
Alchemist, sorry.
The Alchemist is a great book.
The Alchemist is a great book. I agree.
Anarchist
No, I'm sorry. I meant the Anarchist. I meant the Anarchist. I guess that was a Freudian slip from them thinking they're going to create something great out of anarchy, like Alchemist create gold out
I'd
of
read
lead.
the Alchemist one.
But anyway,
Can make you rich.
where I lost the track, is there have also been great books out there who have tackled ethical issues and have had pronounced changes in the society which it affects. I'm going to toss one out there, and it's only a minor one compared to all the ones that are out there. The Jungle.
I don't think that was minor.
No.
What I'm saying is what I can launch off of that is huge, and that just gives you an idea. If I'm comparing that to minor to what someone out there,
For those of us who have not heard of The Jungle, what is it?
you
Upton
gotta explain.
Sinclair.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm sorry. It's a classic. It is by Upton Sinclair. It is a book about...
Nonfiction.
Okay, it's a book about the meat industry, basically, and food, and what was actually going into your sausage.
And
what-
butter and lard.
And butter, lard, other things, human parts, and so forth. And it basically leads to the creation of the FDA. And
And his intention, though, was really about the workers rather than about the meat and packing or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that we can be very erroneous in our thinking of what is responsible or what is not.
Agreed.
We have to be careful on all fronts. And get other people to read it will help.
And we have to be passionate about the ethical issue, too. One of you two had your hands up first.
Well, books that talk about ethical issues often become classics.
Yes.
If you think about a lot of the classics, you just mentioned one, To Kill a Mockingbird. Definitely another one. Can we jump on to the Harper Lee subject? Since we're talking about ethical issues.
Go for it.
So, yeah, go read and go grab their copy of Go Tell a Watchman if you wish. But do know that there's some sketchy stuff maybe in there. And there's some great articles you can read that are going to explain that way better than me. But essentially, you know, as old people often are, they'll sign stuff they didn't necessarily know they wanted to sign. You know, she held this manuscript for years and years and years. You know, I think she would have published it if she wanted to. My favorite argument here is actually that it was a first draft of To Kill a Mockingbird, which would be really cool, actually, if they done it that way. But anyway, jumping
More
off
honest,
that,
you say?
and back onto, you know, what we were talking about. Some of these books, you look at something like Animal Farm, it's a classic. You look at, what's the one that dealt with the industrial age workers?
Which one? There's a couple of them. That's why I was
There's
like...
one. It's one of the classics, and I can't think of it off the top of my head.
There's
Octopus? Is that what you're thinking of? That's railroads.
No, it's the one with the kids in the factories.
Oh.
I can't remember. It just touches on it. It's a sidebar of the book. It's, you know, the character is...
Well, okay, Dickens is a fiction book that deals with...
Oliver Twist.
Yeah.
Oliver
Yeah.
Twist.
That might be what I'm thinking of.
You're actually thinking, I was going to bring that up as a joke.
Yeah, that's kids dealing with the problem of kids back in the day.
Child labor.
Yeah, and I'm going to turn this over to you. But I'm going to say, everybody who has ever listened to these podcasts know that I absolutely hate this book, but I'm going to give it its due. I am actually going to give it its due. I know, mark it on the calendar.
We
Celebrate
all
this
know
next
what's
year.
coming.
Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah, there's another one.
But yet, exactly, it was talk about the dispossessed.
Yes.
I was going to bring up how we don't write in a vacuum, and some of the books that are classics now tackle social issues. Those that you mentioned just now were all, I think, more head-on tackling social issues. But I also like the books that tackle social issues slant. They tell all the truth, but tell it slant, like Emily Dickinson said. Dorothy L. Sayers has a series of mysteries, Lord Peter Wimsey series. They're classic, they're amazing, and a lot of her side characters are kind of her way of exploring social issues that were important in her time. For example, the eugenics movement, and you'll have characters that aren't the main character. The main character is the lens through which you see everything. But side characters who basically live lives that take those ideas to their logical conclusions, or are somewhere along that spectrum. So you get to see these ideas explored and how the world would look if everybody lived in that fashion. And that's not the main thrust of any of the books, not really. But it's fascinating, and it adds another layer of interest to an already good mystery series. And I love books that are able to do that. Anyone?
Well, I was just going to say that even modern books do this. You know, and as you're saying, tackle it, maybe not necessarily head on. There are a lot of books that have just recently come out. I'm just going to throw out Cole Gibson's real quick. You know, gosh, I can't think of the name of it. Life Unaware. Sorry, I already knew the original title. I always call it that. But anyway, Life Unaware tackles bullying in high school, and it really flips it. So it is tackling it directly in kind of a way that is kind of cool, and it deals a lot with online bullying and cyberbullying and stuff like that. So even today, we're still tackling these kind of topics.
Well, that's the playground of science fiction and fantasy. Is able to take a look at issues that are affecting us now and move it just far enough away from the immediate issue to explore it without actually offending anybody, for the most part.
Jenna will reach across the table and absolutely hug you.
I was drawing a picture of Odo when I was
all right.
talking about that.
But really quick,
I wanted to bring up the original title of this episode.
okay, I'll let you bring it up in a second. But let's take a look at that. You opened the door for what I was waiting to talk about.
Awesome.
Let's talk about, first off, TV, and then I'm going to talk about a very classic book series of science fiction fantasy. Star Trek.
Star Trek.
From the...
It had a moral message every
Every single episode had a moral issue and a moral representative. I don't care if you thought the acting was cheesy or not.
That was its charm.
It was.
And it wasn't Kirk?
Yeah, it
That
wasn't.
wasn't the message?
It wasn't. Though
Kirk was
though
actually
Shatner
really
actually
awesome.
expressed it from time to time,
Often, yes.
or Spock, sometimes McCoy. And you can go in more modern episodes. But he literally said his first role was to entertain, but if he could teach in the middle of that entertainment, then he really did do his job. Now, I paraphrase what he said. Mm-hmm. Let's look at another classic series that tackles social issues. Dune.
Dude.
Dune. You have an entire society addicted to drugs.
What? It's just the spice.
It's just a spice. Yeah, it is addicted to drugs.
Just
The society cannot. The society itself cannot function without the drug, and those on Arrakis can't really leave the planet for long without it. Number two, you have what's a runaway religion. The entire first book and second book, Paul Atreides or Paul Muad'Dib is fighting, trying to prevent a jihad, which is going to occur underneath his name. Yes, and yet it happens, and you see what's going on there. You have also the society of those who have and those who have not. The poor versus the rich. Those who control the flow of spice in this case, but the flow of wealth, the flow of information, the flow of merchandise to those who are barely sustaining. You have all this in one book. And actually, eventually more than one book.
There's the environmental stuff.
Thank you. I left that out. And the entire environmental aspect. And
the corruption of the leaders, yeah.
Exactly. All in one book. Go for it, somebody. You want to talk about with the original?
The original title of this episode was Ethical Issues in Science Fiction and Fantasy. And I think one of the reasons we had determined we were going to talk about sci-fi fantasy specifically was that that particular set of genres is built to explore these issues in a way that does not make people feel like their viewpoint is attacked or like they're being preached at. They are, by definition, not our world. So that's a layer of distance between the reader and the subject matter of the story. And because they're meant to entertain, that's another layer of distance between the reader and what they're reading. So it's kind of a safe avenue, I think, sci-fi and fantasy, to explore social issues, social questions, that sort of thing, in a way that other genres don't lend quite as well to, because they're not, by definition, fantastic in some way.
I'd like
I'm going
to
to argue that, but I'll come back to it.
I would like to define what you mean by safe. And what I take it by what you mean by safe is you can write a science fiction book with a fantasy religion and a fantasy policy and all sorts of corruption or whatever you want to do. And it is less likely, not impossible, but less likely you'll be pilloried in real life. It's, like you said, it's also less likely people will take it as a personal attack on their religion. If you write a novel about the problems in Catholicism, of course Catholics are going to feel attacked by it. But if you put it either far into the future or a completely fictional religion, again, the messages might be true and it might be dealing with issues that are present in the Catholic Church, but you know what? The issues are probably present in other religions and non-religious entities, and people can read it, take things out of it, and not be personally attacked by
Or
it.
perhaps
more
the Da Vinci
universal.
Code, which is sitting, there's like 10 copies sitting right on that shelf right there.
Which is behind us.
Just to show
behind
you how
Yeah.
popular it is nowadays.
Exactly.
There are 10
Taking it-
copies.
Taking it out of our world and putting it in a different one in some capacity makes it more universal, because you can't simply refer to things that we know. You have to create a world around it that fits. And that allows the issues to be discussed fully, but also to feel more universal to your readers.
But then again, Dickens did it with the real world, so it's
not impossible.
Yeah.
I'm saying that the genre itself.
Please, Dr. Seuss did it.
Dr. Seuss
You
did
don't
it very
think he
well.
wrote fantasy?
No. He used fantasy to push a message. and,
Exactly. Yeah.
that's what it's for.
I think Jen and then Fedora. If I saw the fans right. I'm not sure.
I was going to say that while speculative genres are a safer place to do this, to explore touchy subjects, I wouldn't say that it was a, underlined safe place.
Yeah.
No.
There is a way to
can
paint
piss
this a
anyone off
little
anyway.
too thin, and just because you want to talk about current events, you can, stand up and put a character up who's supposed to be Obama, and try and disguise the fact that it's Obama, but if you don't do a real good job, then everyone's gonna see straight through you.
And sometimes you're not trying to do it at all, and people take it in a way completely 90 degrees from where you meant it.
I have a specific beef with the way that religion is treated in modern fiction. Modern science fiction, modern fantasy, or whatever.
Which is totally something we should also explore further in an episode, but continue. I think it needs a bigger conversation. Go
Okay.
on.
Well, the point I was making was that usually the what's the word I'm looking for?
The protagonist is fighting against the oppressive religion.
That wasn't the word I was looking for. No.
Okay.
I was going to say agenda.
Ah.
Usually the agenda of whatever author or group of authors is, as far as religion goes, or any sort of educational system or whatever, tends to side one side or the other. And when you're sensitive to that topic, I personally, I'll admit it on tape, I'm a person of faith. I believe in a supernatural, realm, being, or whatever, and I'm very tired of seeing stories where they pretty much look me in the eye and tell me, you're not all science all the time, well, you're wrong. And that's wearying. So it grates. And it is possible to push your agenda far enough to kind of alienate certain people. Now, in some worlds, in a fantasy world, I've written fantasy worlds where there is no God. And that's fine. That's the realm of this world, as long as you make the point clear and you don't stare through the camera. Because I've been stared at through the camera so many times.
Okay, everybody, she's been waiting for a while.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Well, I think Kathleen has a really good point about creating worlds that are not the natural world that we currently live in, because all readers, all viewers of television or movies or whatever, come with a set of expectations. They come with all of their background, all of their baggage.
Yeah.
And it only takes one tiny trigger to set that off and put them in a direction which is very much opposed to any message you're trying to give them. They shut down, they create barriers. And so by couching it as science fiction, or I think another fine way is with humor, as Mark Twain does in Huckleberry Finn, which is the greatest novel ever written in the English.
And by the way, especially for high schoolers, I completely agree with it being the annotated version, because where a modern reader would read it would take a completely different view than what it was meant at the time.
I think it is important what Jen and Fedora have said about being stared at through the camera and realizing that you are being
Preached to?
not just preached to, but told your worldview is wrong.
I call that
Like,
preaching.
yeah.
Lead, don't direct.
Yes.
Your job as a
Lead
writer
generate.
is not to tell your reader what to think. It's to show them a point of view. And something that, like, I am also sensitive to religion and how it is used in certain stories, because I'm also a person of faith. And I'm also a person of color, and I am very conscious of how African Americans and people of color are used in the media that I consume. And so I've noticed, I stopped watching movies that were strictly like gay character centric like 10 years ago. Because at that time, we did not have the strides we have made as far as like gay people being equal citizens in the U.S., and a lot of people were still closeted, and persecution was much more socially acceptable. And the filmmakers making movies about gay people were basically saying your life is going to suck because this is all that you have to look forward to. Persecution, and one of you is probably going to die. And while that was a very humanizing message that they presented of gay people, I got really sick of message stories and message characters. Those were characters that were being used to preach at me that such and such group was human, such and such group, we should appreciate them more, and they would inevitably die. Like,
It sounds like the modern version of Uncle Tom's.
Philadelphia.
Yeah, Uncle Tom's Cabin.
so yeah, like, but there are things like that for all sorts of different social issues. So on the one hand, while it is good to explore social issues in our writing, we also need to be careful that we do not make martyrs and angels of people that are human.
Can I talk about The Fault in Our Stars real quick?
Yes, you can, and then I'm going to dovetail back into her. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, this is in the exact same vein that we're talking here. I want to bring up The Fault in Our Stars, which is a novel and movie that just came out. The movie just came out. The novel came out a while ago by John Green, and it actually speaks in the novel sort of to that point. The novel's about kids who are suffering from terminal cancer, and is written from the point of view of someone who has spent a lot of time with kids who have been suffering from terminal cancer, and giving an honest view of them, that they're frustrated and they're scared, and they're still very human and very teenager-y. You know, they're still living their lives and being teenagers and being cynical, and the characters in the book complain about cancer books about cancer kids, where the little cancer kid is saintly and sitting there, oh no, it doesn't hurt that bad, and oh, I can do it, you know, and everyone marvels about how strong they are, and all the cancer kids roll their eyes because they've been in cancer wards, and they know that angelic, anti-human sort of portrayal of what would be considered them is how wrong it is, and how it's not meant for them, it's meant for the other people to understand.
I just remembered something from my real life that I didn't remember till you brought it up. But I was like about 6, 7, and I was getting either an MRI or a CAT scan, I forget which. I was 7. But I was there at the same time as another boy, a few years older, like 11. He was a whole lot more scared than I was. So I went first, because the idea is he as the older one was supposed to go first so I could watch and not be scared, because it was important to hold still. Well, his mom was in there with him holding his hand. It was hard for him to keep still. He was crying. I could hear I went first.
Yeah.
And I was fine. I was alone. Mine went fine. And by the way, they didn't find anything. It was a rule out thing.
Yeah.
But he went in, and I got to watch, because I really wanted to watch, but, I needed to go first because the other boy was scared, and I could hear him crying in the room, and I was fine alone, but his mom had to be in there holding his hand. And I watched, and I remember seeing the brain tumor. I didn't really know it was a brain tumor at a time, and no one remembered it, but I remember seeing this little, circular thing right on his scan. It's like, yeah. And part of this is reconstructed based on conversations with my mom, but, so they're kids.
Look, dovetailing back, I want to mention a few fictional items. There are 3 are books. Anyway, some are books, some are going to be TV series that do what you're talking about, Kathleen, a moment ago. They don't preach it. They don't treat people like angels and demons, if you will. I'm mixing now. Everybody's up. I was jumping in earlier. Let's go with, first off, Clockers. Does anybody know this book?
Oh, is that where you can buy and sell time?
No. This is by Richard Price.
Okay.
It is about narcotic dealing. It is one of the inspirations that comes to a TV series, The Wire, which showed police surveillance as well as the breakdown of various systems, which our society relies on systems. The first season dealt with the drug scene. Now, drug scene never goes away. It gets input into other ones. But it shows a breakdown of the police and breakdown of the drug kings. Next one was about the docks. This is all occurring in Baltimore, and how the corruption's occurring there. Eventually we get to City Hall. We eventually get to the mayor, to the school systems, with no child left behind, or as they joke, and I love to quote them, no corner left behind. which we are seeing a lot now of, this testing that's out there is not really doing what we thought it would do. And then it gets to the news media. The Baltimore Sun, I think, sorry, Baltimore people, if I got the name of a newspaper wrong, but it shows the breakdown of the systems in there. And it's not saying, this person's evil, this person's good, this is and a shame on you for being a drug dealer, a shame on you for being a cop who's doing technically not exactly legal surveillance. Now there's that. Let's go in the heat of a night. Book and movie. And actually the books, there's a couple of books, not just the first one, tackled racism. Yeah, it came kind of head on, but it wasn't a they're bad, I'm good type situation. It is people being people. And everybody has their own agenda. Go ahead.
Well, I think diversity in fiction is really good, and using a diverse group of people as your characters without sacrificing the humanity of any of them to make them message characters will do its own part in making our culture a more acceptable and accepting culture, and putting people in positions where kids can look up and see someone like them wherever they want to be in life. I was going to bring up, though, two things. The cancer patients that Jen spoke about, in relation to that, disability in characters. When disabled characters are magically healed at the end of the story, that pisses so many people off, because you had someone that represented them, and suddenly the pinnacle of their existence is being, just like all the people who don't have that disability.
What was that?
And it suggests that their lives are not complete and whole in and of themselves, and that's a responsibility issue as well.
Flowers for Algernon. Sorry, just had to.
There's that one, and there's China Mountain Zhang. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking. Maureen McHugh, I think. It's a really good book, but the character, his work is built around his Asperger's. Like, he's perfect for his job because of that. But he really wants, I believe, to go into space. Don't quote me on this, because it's been like a while since I read this book. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the book, he goes into this operation to basically correct, with air quotes, his disability that will now allow him to go into space. So he goes into space in the epilogue, and he gets a happily ever after. But that one thing alienated so many people who otherwise had seen themselves in this book. Mm-hmm. So it's important to recognize what you do and what constitutes a happy ending, for one thing, for these characters, because not everybody wants to be just like you. Not everybody does. Mm-hmm. Some people are happy as they are. Mm-hmm. And it's important to recognize that in our stories as well. The other thing I wanted to bring up is a little different. Using characters to further a social agenda in the way that Superman did in the radio shows in the 1970s. Basically, the Ku Klux Klan was getting kind of big because they had plenty of stuff to fight about, because, Jim Crow was starting to get knocked down. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that Superman, the radio show, did that was kind of a public service, I think, is Klan members started being the bad guys in shows, and they were all bumbling idiots. So the impression everyone had of the Klan who listened to the radio, which was everybody, because it was a Superman show, was Klan members are stupid. They don't want to be a Klan member. They don't know anything. Mm-hmm. They can barely get out of their own hoods. Like, why would you want to join them? They're clearly, if they're that stupid, what they have to say must be stupid as well. Mm-hmm. And that did wonders of social good. So you can do stuff like that in your writing. You just have to be aware of what you're doing. The end.
Mm-hmm. Well, also say, we've talked about some social issues that occur in the United States. Mm. Okay? Guess what? These are social issues around the world that we write about, we read about, and so forth. Racism. Let's just go with that one right off the bat. Since you talked about the Klan, I'm going to borrow it. And I talked about
you can
in the
have
heat
the
of the
Klan.
night. Oh, trust me.
The
only thing I have good for the Klan is 999. It's going to take 9 surgeons, 9 hours to remove my size 9 boot from their first off, I'm going to stay in the United States for first author, and then I'm going to jump outside the United States. Inside the United States, racism. And not racism necessarily, or not racial attitudes. This is going to be a better phrase for this guy. Racial attitudes for a guy who looked white, could have passed as white, but he was part black, and he refused to take on the term of being white. And that is Charles W. Chestnut, who wrote during the Harlem Renaissance and looking at the internal structure of the black culture, which was the more white you look, the more rights you seem to have, or the more established. At least during that time.
There are threads of that still existing.
I know there are. I wasn't going to jump it, but yes.
Go on.
But he's a very good read. If you have never read him, find his books. I will warn you, his dialogue is a little hard to read because of the accents. Number 2, another favorite author of mine, Lin Yitang, Chinese, talks about the racism or the racial attitudes between, I hate to use this term, but pure Chinese and those who are of mixed origin. And guys, I don't personally prefer that term. I'm just using it as is. And one book that I'm going to recommend off the bat is Juniper Loa. Juniper Loa is a woman who is of mixed origin. I believe she was in Shanghai. Don't hold that to me. It's been a while since I've read it. In fact, I was a teenager. But the main character has always fallen in love with her, but his family won't let him marry her, be with her. And because of that attitude, and he has to leave her behind, if you will, she ends up going into the prostitution realm. And so forth. So it's kind of an interesting show of that. And actually a lot of Lin Yitang's books also represent this. So there is a chance to look at ethical issues from the internal side of any one position, not just the externals.
I haven't read this book. I don't remember the author's name, but I remember the title because it is memorable. And it's called Oreo. And it was a book written during the Harlem Renaissance, but it was not a Harlem Renaissance book. It was very poorly received at the time. And the person reviewing it says it feels like it was read much more recently. But it's about a woman's life. She had a black mother, I think a Jewish father, and of course she was perceived as black, but she did voice acting as I forget what character she was supposed to be playing as the voice actor, but as a white Jewish grandmother, she spoke Yiddish, from, that she learned from her grandfather. So, it's interesting view of race at that time.
I'm going to turn this over to you, but I'm going to just say one thing real fast. You use that term, and that term is in the culture. Somebody who is black on the outside but white on the inside. In the hearing impaired community or the deaf community, they have what's called a hearie. They are exactly expressing the same idea of somebody who is deaf on the inside but pretends they're a hearing person. That actually goes from culture to culture, and it's a social issue as far as I'm concerned. Go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to bring up the current Miss Japan is black and Japanese. So Miss Japan 2015, if you ever want to see anything about the issues that are still surrounding that, and related to the Chinese, pure Chinese versus, pure
Well, this
Japanese.
is Japanese, but yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to talk about that, you can look her up. Miss Japan 2015. And Misty Copeland, I wanted to talk about. She is a black ballet dancer with the, American Ballet Theater. She's one of the head people, not head people, but like one of the star dancers. That
Principal
one.
dancer.
Yes, she's a principal dancer.
Prima donna?
I don't know if she's
That would be
I don't
opera.
believe
That's
they
the
use
principal.
that term.
Okay, go ahead, though. I'm sorry.
So Misty Copeland, something that she's doing right now with one of the sports drink companies or something, maybe it's Gatorade, whatever. Putting that social issue that she's basically faced a lot of discrimination as far as getting roles because she is, for all intents and purposes, a black person in a very, very white world, in the very white world of ballet lead roles. So one of the things she's doing to put that issue in front of people and to inspire girls who are looking and saying, what I want to do when I grow up, is she's joined this ad campaign that basically says you can do whatever you want. And the voiceover reads over one of her rejection letters because she didn't look the part of a ballerina. And she was too old at 13 to join this company. And she's using something that happened and using her art, the art of ballet, to put forward a social issue without making a giant message out of it. She's not the black ballet dancer. She's just a ballet dancer. Just her background itself makes what she does political, but she does not have to address it directly to entertain. It brings the issue up without preaching.
Is honesty the angle that we're looking for here? Having an honest place to come from. She's telling her story, and that has everything to do with the message she's sending.
Yes.
But she's not. But it's not that she's here to preach the message. It's that she's here to tell the story. The story has issues that she wants to put forward, but it's her honest story that she is telling.
Yes, and it never takes the forefront. It never takes the focus away from her dance, her art. And I think we can do the same thing as writers. When we write something, it can be near and dear to us, and the nearer and dearer it is, the more honestly and the more compellingly we'll be able to write. Because part of what makes her story so compelling is that she lived it. But we can do that same thing and put issues in front of people without preaching at them. The act of writing is political. We don't have to make it more overt than just telling a good story, because it'll all be there.
And this is the way to do this. Is, through honesty comes the realization that you're creating a real person, a real character, not just a stereotype or something that's hollow or something that doesn't, fulfill what would be a person, the authenticity of that character is kind of what I'm going for there. So as you're saying, through honesty, I think is the way you get to authenticity. And being honest, because you can touch on any subject. I mean, every book should touch on something. It's part of what we do as writers is to not just write a popcorn novel where, it's just playing out and having fun. But
not
to
that
actually...
there's anything wrong with that.
No, I mean, even somebody like me who technically writes popcorn novels, YA for a younger YA audience, I even put historical facts, fun stuff, life lessons, and then isms. I have an ism in each book. Classisms in Iron Horseman. But, each of the trilogies, each book will have an ism in it. So, even there, it's not, I'm not trying to smack anybody in the face with it. It's just there as part of the story so that hopefully by the end you learn something. But, you've often heard me talk about characters with asthma because I have asthma and I think it's portrayed really horribly and completely inauthentic. If I were going to write somebody who had asthma, I'd write a much, much different story than anything I've ever seen portrayed.
I'm going to let Fedora go, then I'm going to kick the can a little bit.
I actually looked up a definition of ethical writing.
Yeah.
And it seems to have three components as far as I can tell.
Okay.
And one you've been talking about, that it's truthful. I think that goes not just to being intellectually truthful or spiritually or even emotionally truthful, but I think you also have a responsibility to get it right, to get the details right if you are doing something historical, to get the details right. That's one of the things that I work my buds off to do, for example. And I know that Brad does too. Okay, the second is that it should be complete. That is not misleading in some fashion from what you actually want to say. As we were talking about the jungle, what he intended is not what came across to people. So you have to find a way to be true to yourself, really. And that may mean having lots of other people read it and see what their impressions of what you've written. And the final thing is do no harm. We have a responsibility like doctors. First, do no harm.
And with that, I'm going to ask everybody, I'm just rephrasing my question now, thanks to thanks to those definitions. Two aspects. One, and if you want to use examples, please feel free if you want to throw those under the bus, but I'm not saying you have to or even recommending it. When do you know that what the message you're reading is being dishonest. It is all about the message. It's not about the reality of the situation. When do you get kicked out of the story? Is basically with that. And then number 2, I'm going to ask the question of how do you prevent what you write, or how do you recognize in what you read when something is out to do harm, irregardless if that was the intention of a person? Whoever wants to go first.
Okay.
I know I threw 2
When it
strokes
becomes
through.
inauthentic and starts getting preachy is when the message takes over the book. When the message takes over the story. When what you're trying to say becomes more important than the main character, more important than the plot, more important than anything. I'm going to throw 2 novels out because I just watched this movie the other day. One is Lord of the Flies, and the other one would be The Maze Runner, at least the movie version. I'm just going to go with that because I haven't actually read The Maze Runner yet.
Okay.
Okay. Saying that, and despite what he goes into the maze and everything, they love to show this when young men are alone. There's a complete breakdown back to, almost like cavemanic kind of, barbaric ways. Lord of the Flies starts off, pretty decently, and then makes a left turn into Crazy Town. And, even in The Maze Runner, they kind of play off of that. With the little camp and, the way that it all goes down there, to the point where the only real... The guy who is very determined to follow all the rules is the one who ends up breaking all the rules. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. That, both those, the book and the movie, to me at least, the message that when young men get together there will be a breakdown and everything goes to Crazy Town, takes over. I mean, A Lord of the Flies is a great book, but it's not what I remember about it. It's the crazy stuff that happens and, the killing of the kids and all that kind of stuff. That's what I end up remembering and pulling out of that book. So the message gets, I should say the story gets jumbled up and lost in the message.
I read Lord of the Flies in high school as a class, and later I was listening, I think it was the Diane Rehm shows, did a book review of it. And in both of my memories of reading the book and talking about it in class, and their review brought this up and I agreed with it, teachers teach that book wrong. They teach it as, I'm forgetting it, but the hero of the book is like the good, upstanding person.
Ralph.
Yeah, and then there's the evil character that he represents chaos. And really,
Jack.
yeah. And but really they're boys being boys, and NASA in real life has done a lot of sociology research into group dynamics. And if you have a small group of people, they tend to form factions, and the factions tend to conflict. That's a natural human thing that almost always happens when there's no strong outside force. And if you read it from that point of view of boys being boys, yeah, things go too far, but sometimes they go too far in real life when there's no outside structure to impose order.
But how... Okay, I'm sorry.
But
Going back to, though, the message
Yeah.
is... How do you know you're being... As a writer, how do you catch yourself using the message as a slap in the face? How do you correct it? And then... Oh, gotcha. And how do you react when you see it being slapped in your face? Go ahead, Kathleen. I'm sorry, just pointing back to the questions.
Oh, well, I was going to say that I think Brad's already hit that nail on the head when he said when the message becomes more important than the story you're telling and the characters, when it takes over, you've gone too far. And I think that's true for a lot of the things we discuss. When they take over the story from what is the story and the characters, it takes you out of it. So, when...
yeah, I disagree that Lord of the Flies, at least the book, focuses on the message, but it seems like it must because so many of the official literature on it for the reviews is all about the message.
I can see that, but the point in this case is that when you sacrifice good story and good characters to do something that derails both, you are taking your reader out of the story and you are sacrificing the story, and you're probably going to alienate a reader if you continue. Like, in movies, when something stops being believable, I'm like, no. In books, when something is not believable, I'm taken out of the story. And it's because some aspect,
Sorry.
something the author thought was important, has basically removed common sense to make what they wanted to work. Like when characters stop and have a long discussion when they're running for their lives and they just stay fixed in one place. I'm like, no, this is not the time. You are going to die if you stay there any longer. Taken right out of the story.
But we need to have a conversation as the water is filling up in the room as to whether or not we go into the next room.
Right.
And it's the
You know,
exact...
because that makes sense.
It's the same thing that messages do when they take over a story.
Yes.
It kicks you out for the same reason. It's not logical.
I have a
This-
problem with
The
logic bombs
writers
in movies.
created an entire world that fits together and interlocks very carefully. And then they've just set it aside to talk to you, staring through the camera, as Jen said. Like,
Or
no.
kiss.
Yeah.
Or
like,
kiss.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're kissing. You're both going to get killed by the Terminator in a minute. He's
Right.
coming.
Yeah.
Force fire, gotta get you.
Yeah.
And then the cuts, oh my goodness, what I hate in movies is when they do something that awful and then they cut to whatever's trying to do them harm and the thing has moved farther away from them.
After Earth.
Really? That took time. It would go forward. Ugh. Ways to excuse bad,
Right.
Writing?
yes. Don't do those things.
Let me dovetail again with what you're saying. Another thing that kicks me with, I'm going to answer my own question, is I can usually tell when the message for all Brad's term, because he hit, as Jen said, Brad hit the nail on the head.
Kathleen said.
Kathleen said. Sorry. One of
you
you
credit.
two. They're both on my right
I
side.
was a great artist for a minute. That was
This is a very nice picture of the gentleman in the top hat you have just drawn.
Anyway, what I was going to say is when the characters become cardboard thin, you know it's the message, not the story anymore. And on that note, because I'm not even going to mention my references on that, but that's one thing John Gardner used to describe certain books, is when the message is being like that, you can tell they're cardboard thin characters. They're evil because they're evil. They're good because they're good.
They're gonna die because they're gay. I started just keeping
Enough
count.
said.
I started just keeping account. I was like, oh, this one's gay. He's gonna get beaten up, potentially raped, or die. Check. Okay, next story.
That's the
Yep,
worst
check,
kind of
check.
bingo.
I hated it. Like, the gay character was gonna die. Angel in Rent
Yeah.
is literally an angel.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that character. There are no flaws because when Angel dies, it's supposed to gut you.
Can we talk about how Idris Elba is always a villain? And yet, as Andal, he's like the coolest guy ever?
Well, you're forgetting about him in Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim, he
yes,
was
no,
badass.
yeah. Well, he is badass in there. But even then, he's
He was
kind of a
Gundam
hard
Dad.
butt.
Ibris?
Yeah, but he was...
But in everything
he's an
else...
actor.
He's an actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's Luther off...
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's where he's technically a good guy.
Technically, yeah, he's... But see, that's what I want. I want more of that. But
Well,
he's so often the villain.
He's getting more of those roles.
I know
Yeah.
he is, and I like that.
Yeah,
I want my... See, it just goes to this. I want my villains to be well-rounded characters.
and you know what? You just took me back to The Wire. Because he was.
He was, yes.
And if you ever want a fantastic lesson on how to run a business, though he's running a narcotics business in this case, watch the actor's character.
Does anyone know if he's a villain or a hero in Star Trek?
I thought he was a villain, but I could be wrong.
That'd
I
be
wanted
cool.
to-
He's
I
a
didn't
good
know it-
villain, so be awesome. But
You brought
As a
up the-
sidebar, there's a real Star Trek movie coming out before Star Trek. Anyway, sorry.
I wanted to, because you brought up The Wire and
Excellent.
the way this character plays, I realized I hadn't mentioned Law and Order at all.
Oh.
Law and Order tackles
Dun-dun.
all the social issues. Like, it'll take things straight out of the headlines and
It
show
is.
you a story in which it happens, and you're conflicted about who's right and who's wrong. There was one story that I remember, trigger warning, a man had a disorder that basically he would have sex in the night. And his girlfriend was with him, and she knew about it, and they just would have fun. He would be unconscious and wake up and find out he'd given her a great time.
As long as she was alright with that.
The girlfriend's sister was sleeping on their couch. Their bedroom door
Oh,
was
I
locked.
remember this one, yes.
And some person kidnaps the girlfriend, leaves the door unlocked when he leaves, because when you're kidnapping a person, you don't care if you lock the house afterwards. So the boyfriend rapes this girl's little sister. Who's right in this case? He was unconscious. They had planned for it, but what do you do in those cases? That's like a negligible problem as far as population percentage is concerned.
Yeah.
But Law & Order tackled all sorts of things like that, and it made you feel for both sides, and it also made you feel like justice would not always be done, which is why I hated the end of Law & Order. Like, it would be great right up until they were going to tell you if it was guilty or not guilty, and then I'd be like, no, that guy killed 5 people. He's guilty. Not guilty! I hate the show.
But yet that actually mirrors reality a lot more than otherwise.
Which makes you think further.
Of course.
It was...
Which makes me angry.
Yeah.
All of Law and Order doesn't model reality very well, but that part does.
Yeah, but see, that put me into our justice system in a way I wouldn't have been able to in other ways.
Yeah.
Like in other forms. And it brought our justice system to a wide audience. And I think they used their platform pretty well as far as bringing social issues to people's attention.
Speaking of that, and speaking of some of the problems with that, Law and Order cases go to trial a whole lot more often than they do in real life. But in the grand scheme of things, does that really matter? Now, CSI and several of these forensic-based shows...
Oh, God. Don't get me going. Go ahead.
Okay, first off...
Just look at his face.
Yeah, 80 to 90% of they
crash it into a wall.
I'm just waiting. Go ahead.
80 to 90% of what they do is technically possible, scientifically. If they had unlimited budgets and if all these tests took 10 minutes.
I like that you said technically possible.
Yes, for instance, you
in
can
a
give
world
chewing...
where all these things are true, which they're not, it would be possible.
Well,
oh my goodness,
okay.
Keep going, this is great.
Well, here's an example of an episode, fairly minor, but the security guard and the stripper, I think this was in Las Vegas, had an altercation, and the security guard spit on her. And she was arrested for assault on the security officer, and she claimed, well, she only assaulted him after he spit on her, so he started the fight. Well, this CSI guy sprayed her shirt and proved that he actually spit on it. All those things are perfectly possible. They're even feasible. They would not get done in real life.
And all I'm going to say is I'm going to turn it over to him and just borrow that. As I was cringing, I knew I was going to be okay with you, but still I was cringing.
Yeah.
Dear CSI, the people you're portraying are lab rats. They're intelligent. They're useful. They do a lot of good work. They do not go out and interrogate people. They do not carry guns and start shooting people. Leave that to the real cops.
But hopefully they're just as sexy. All right, I'm actually going to take
Brains
this
are always
and
sexy.
chuck everything we just set out the window. There are times when I think you can totally break ethics and do what you want to do, and I'm going to bring up Jurassic Park and Jurassic World here. And the reason I do this is nothing in that is real. The ethics of it are shabby. A velociraptor is the size of a turkey and just as feathered. So Chris Pratt should really be in front of a bunch of turkeys.
He's a chicken
I like the
wrangler.
version. I like the version that shows it
wrangler.
in front of cats.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, and the reason I say this is that none of the dinosaurs in the movie are actually from the Jurassic period. Not a single one of them. They say they have this hybrid dinosaur. Well, if you go back to the first one, they're all hybrids with amphibian DNA in it. So already science is out the window, honesty and all that kind of fun stuff is just chucked out. But the reality is that I don't know if I want to see the real Jurassic Park. I don't know if I'm really going to be scared of little turkeys, chasing after me, or the fact that, T-Rex probably wouldn't really be running around eating everything under the sun. So it's just kind of one of those things that's fun. And the point is that Jurassic Park is more fun because he kind of chucks all that stuff out the window, and we agree to disbelieve in the science and all that kind of fun stuff. Oh, the other one, that giant thing that comes out of the water, it's like 500 feet in the movie. It was 60
Leviathan,
feet. Yeah, it's like
whatever it
60
actually
feet
was.
in real life. Yeah. So it's just a little bit longer than the actual shark it eats. But the point is that, I want a giant dinosaur to come out of the water and eat a shark. I want a giant, I want the velociraptor, the cool, what we used to consider a dinosaur, and all that kind of fun stuff. There's paleontologists today who think, the classic dinosaur is basically the bird without its feathers analogy. So, it probably looks way different. So it kind of falls into that. If you can get away with it, do it. If you can get your audience to agree to follow that disbelief, do it.
they have to suspend their disbelief.
They
They have to
do.
want to, and they have to know that it's unreal.
Yeah.
And I think
Exactly,
everybody
yeah.
does
Exactly.
with Jurassic Park,
Yeah.
but not with everything necessarily.
Exactly.
I'm going to say, though, that it does have an ethical side that is real, and it shares the same ethical theme,
Chaos theory? No.
ethical theme as
Life finds a way.
Spaceballs. The idea is, let's create something, and let's merchandise the crap out of it. Let's see if we can sell it. Let's merchandise it, and sell it, and then it becomes a question of, did you really just destroy your own product?
No,
with
I
that?
love it.
Well,
Screw the toys, I don't want it, but I love dinosaurs.
One of the things that I liked very
here.
much about Jurassic World was that it asked that question: do people really want to just see dinosaurs? They want
Yes.
something bigger and better. So even as it was showing us
Yes.
that this was not a dinosaur, this was an abomination creature spawned by man's lust for
Better,
drama.
right? That's thrill.
lust
yeah.
for bigger and better. This was not an actual dinosaur. We're watching this movie where this monster they have created to make a bigger, better, not actually dinosaur is killed. We're loving this movie.
Yes.
It's bigger and better even than Jurassic Park as far as all the fights going on with the dinosaurs.
Bigger
But it's
and
still-
better.
Yes, it's bigger and better. All the attractions are bigger and better and ridiculous. They're not real though. And the movie says that. They're like, this isn't a dinosaur. This is a monster. You don't know what you created, but the people want this. But it's dangerous. But the people want this.
It's
it asks that
ironic
question.
because the audience, so many,
We're
of my
participating.
friends, you guys included, who watched this movie and were saying, "Why is there a hybrid dinosaur? It would be super cool if it was just more dinosaurs." It's interesting how they're making the comment. It's like, "Did you come here to see the hybrid dinosaur?" And we're like, "No."
Can I bring up something related to Jurassic World though?
Sure.
I enjoyed the movie very much.
Oh, yeah. Very good movie.
And I got home and I woke up the next morning and I was like, there were 4 women in that movie. And I know the relationship status of 3 of them. The only reason I don't know the relationship status of the 4th was because the Leviathan ate her and she was busy babysitting one of the other women's kids.
And she was unfairly killed.
Was she not
What
on the
did
phone
she-
with her boyfriend, though?
Was
What?
she?
She was
Then
on
I
the
know
phone
the
with her
relationship
boss.
status of all
Or was
4.
the, yeah, I guess
It was
so.
the boss.
Yeah.
So,
But she wanted to get away that weekend for some reason. I can't
but
remember what it was.
see, the thing though is most of the main characters in that movie were male. Like in Jurassic Park, one of the kids was a girl. Not so this time. They're all boys. It was a boys' club movie. And for better or for worse, I know there was a married woman. I know there was a woman who was frigid and unloving, and part of her big plot was to become loving and fall in love with the hero. It's a romantic plot. I know that there was a woman who was babysitting the kids.
Yes.
And I know that there was a woman techie who stopped the inevitable kiss between the other techie because she had a boyfriend. She
Yes.
just didn't bring it up because it was at work. I don't know the relationship status of more than Chris Pratt and the husband.
No, wait a minute. You know the relationship
Oh, and the
habits of
boys-
techie.
I was going to say the oldest boy is on
The oldest
prowl.
boy is an asshat because he had a girlfriend and he's still checking out
Exactly.
everyone else. The youngest boy is too young for that, thank you. And the techie, I guess, is single. But, like, there are so many more men in that film. Why do I know the relationship status of the 4 women? That is a social issue. We should be asking ourselves why we do that in our films, in our books, in our stories.
Well, what you were saying earlier about, or what Brad was saying earlier about, breaking this ethical issue is fine, but Fedora's definition, the last part of it, do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess if people are, if the little kids see this and believe it be true, if they're actually interested in dinosaurs, they'll find out, go to the science center, whatever, and find out that, guess what? Pretty much nothing you saw was right. But, for instance, like in CSI, people go onto juries expecting to see all this evidence that's not going to be there.
That's true.
I think we need to remember that on the one hand it's fiction and it's for a specific audience, and we need to recognize that as we suspend our disbelief, these things are fantasy. I think it's part of the reader expectation or the viewer expectation in this case is called into question. Because Ani Franco said any tool is a weapon if you hold it right. I think she's entirely correct. I could kill someone with a book. Dictionaries, or I could rip out a
Yes.
page and slash somebody's throat if I
That
was
would
an
be
awesome
challenging.
character
No,
in a
it's not.
movie. So,
yes,
If
you
you're
can.
Jackie Chan, you can do it.
so it really depends on who your audience is and what they're going to decide to take from what you do. But as far as the writer themselves is concerned, write a good story and try and make sure that if it's going to tell you how to kill a bunch of people, you fudge it, like Stephen King did. Because he learned what happens when you introduce some ideas that are so dangerous into the public. After that, he started changing things so that people could not replicate what he wrote. We just need to be cautious.
I think we're dancing around a very important philosophical point, and it's about the no harm point. And the point I want to make about it is fear. And how much fear is right to try to instill in our audience. And do we want it to be realistic fear, or is it in fact cathartic that they should be safe and feel the fear but know that no harm can come to them? And which of these, if any, is actually socially responsible? I don't think I have an answer, but I think it's something that every writer ought to consider.
And with that, actually, to be honest, I think you opened us up right, and you just summed it all up correctly. And with that, to our audience, catch us next week for another topic in the writing industry. Have a great week writing, and think deeply about what you're writing. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Right Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is an online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. Please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.